Hey, I'm Jake, and today I'm talking about pens. Alright, with Inktober coming up, I thought it'd be good to talk about pens. A lot of people are wondering what pen they should use, what pen works best for the style of drawing that they want to do. So today I'm going to break it down. You could really get lost in the weeds here with the thousands of different pens that there are. And so what I'm going to do is tell you about the 4 main drawing pen categories and just tell you some of my favorites from each category and show you how they work. Alright, let's do this. The 4 main categories of pens are brush pens, technical pens, ballpoint pens, and nibs. So let's talk about each of these pens, what they're good for, what they're not good for, and why you might want to use it for your drawing. Alright, first up we have the brush pen. And brush pens literally have a brush tip. Yeah, you can see here, I'll just take this nib, you can actually see individual fibers. Alright, and these fibers carry the ink out to the tip, and it's like you're actually painting or drawing with a brush. So let's look at this brush pen and why you want to use the brush pen. So the brush pen, one of its greatest abilities is to be able to go from thin lines to very thick lines with just applying a little bit different amount of pressure. A lot of people find brush pens hard to use because it takes a lot of hand control. There's definitely a learning curve there. But I like the brush pen because of the organic line that you get. There's always a little bit of line variation happening in it. I've got sometimes a little bit of a hand tremor that I think adds a nice wiggliness to my line work. And brush pens are really good for anybody who wants to add an organic feeling to the line work that you're doing. So what I like doing is juxtaposing the organicness of the line work you can get from a brush pen with drawing mechanical machinery type stuff. And I think what that does is it gives the machinery a lot of life. Brush pens are really good for going in, doing light line work, technical work. You know, go in there and add details like this, and then adding heavy spot blacks to give your, you know, to pop in shadows and to give your lines a little bit more dimension. So this is why I like using brush pens for my particular drawings. All right, let's look at the technical pen now. The technical pen is something you're going to want to use for very technical, precise drawings. That's why they were developed. They have a hard plastic tip which lends itself to a very clean, crisp, uniform line. It doesn't matter how hard I push or how light I draw, I'm still going to get a pretty similarly even line. Some technical pens vary a little bit in that they have some spring to the tip, and you can get a little bit of line difference there, but for the most part you're going to get this uniform straight line. And the reason for this is these were designed for technical drawings. So if you needed precise, clear, crisp line work for something, you would choose a technical pen to give you line work that doesn't have any sort of variance in what the line's doing. So a lot of times architects, engineers, people like that will use the technical pens for their line drawings. I used a technical pen for years to draw my Missile Mouse comics and other comics, and what I would do is I'd fake the line variation that you would sometimes get with a brush pen or drawing with a brush. And so what I'd go in is I'd lay down just an even line for everything, and then I'd go back in and build up that line to make it thick in some places and leave it thin in other places. And what I found was it was just easier for me to do this, even though more time consuming. It was easier for my hand to work this way because it didn't require as much muscle memory and you know, those neural pathways that you need to build to to use something a little more freewheeling like the brush pen. But what I found was when I finally got good at using a brush pen, I could do the same thing in less time because of just how unique the brush pen was in building up the line variants here. In one stroke, I could do a thick and a thin, whereas it would take it takes several tries to build that up with the technical pen. And again, I mean, you could see here the difference between these two. This is, it has line variation, but it's still a very crisp, clean line. And in the brush pen, you could still see like some wobbliness, some texture maybe there in the edge of the line work. And so that's what you're looking for with the technical pen is if you want a clean, crisp line, you're probably going to want to use one of these. All right, next up is the ballpoint pen. The ballpoint pen has a ball point. That's literally why it's called that. And if you were to cut the tip of it apart and look at it with a microscope, it would look something like that. And your ink, exists right here. And as this ball rolls, the ink comes from behind and comes to the tip of the pen, and then it transfers it to the paper. Okay, as it touches. So that's basically how a ballpoint pen works. And these pens I don't use very often. And there's different kinds of inks and different kinds of ballpoint pens, and there's so many of them. But if you're going to use one, I like the High-Tech C. And the reason you might want to use a ballpoint pen is they're very good for sketching. You can go in there and get some nice uniform lines, but the pen, for some reason, this ball tip doesn't like to, it's not as graceful and as, I would say, uniform sometimes as the technical pen. So while there are similarities in the line work to the technical pen, your line is still going to have a little more character, and you're going to see a little more of the artist's hand in the line work. And so that's why I like using these ballpoint pens for sketching. And you can see here that as I go in and move it faster, the line gets lighter. The slower I use it, the thicker and darker the line gets. And so that's basically what you want to think about when you're using a ballpoint pen. Is the drawing that I want going to be a little more sketchy, a little more scratchy? If that's the effect that you're looking for, then yeah, this might be the pen type for you. And last we have the Nib Pen, and again there's just a world of nibs out there. So many different kinds that you could experiment and work with. Right here, this is like a manga nib that I found on Jet Pens, and I'm using it with Sumi Ink 60 here. And let's test it out. The thing with the nib is it is messy. Already my fingers are all inky with this, but you have to dip it and you have to keep going back and dipping it, and that's probably the biggest drawback to using one of these pens. So you dip it in there and you get the ink well nice and full, and then you come into your, look at that, I'm already making a mess on the paper. You come in here, and then what is great about this pen is you can get a nice uniform line if you want, but the harder you push down and the lighter you push, the thick and thins you can get with the pen. I also really like the scratchy, the scratchiness, the noise that this pen makes. So these are good. You can use it for sketching a little bit. You can come in and sketch in some lines like that. But for the most part, it's a way to get a clean, crisp line with some character to it. And it takes a while for sometimes, depending on the ink of the paper that you're using, for it to dry. And so what you can see here is this line is kind of bleeding in between different lines that I'm doing. There it is, it's already drying out a little bit, gotta dip it again. So you can see how much line you can make with a single dip right there. But I like this pen just for the character, the line work, the character in the line work that you can get. I don't use it very often, but just getting it out for this video and to demonstrate, I'm thinking I should probably do some more with a nib pen. All right, so now let's do a drawing sample from each of these pens of the same exact thing, so we could see what the subtle differences are between these pens. What I'm going to do is just draw a sphere with the shadow on it and a cast shadow underneath it. And we'll start with the brush pen. So I'm just going to lightly lay in that contour line, and then show you how well it spots blacks. And then I'm going to add in just some light hatching here to show how well it does with that. Brush pens are very delicate. You have to have a delicate touch to get the kind of lines that you want to get. That's why some people have such a hard time using them. Okay, so there's the brush pen. Now let's do the technical pen. I'm going to lay in the shadow now. It's harder to fill in your blacks there with this. And I'm going to hatch in the edges here. And you can see I'm not getting very much line variation with this pen. All right, so that's that. Let's do the ballpoint pen now. Drawing the contour line, the shadow. Really hard to get a nice thick black in there without making it look liney. But it is great for sketching in this rim shadow here to the ball. Okay, there's that, and now let's do the nib here. Nibs work best when you're pulling them away from you. It's just the way that the tip is designed. Instead of pushing it, you have to a lot of times pull the nib towards you. This paper isn't quite sturdy enough for the nib that I'm doing. I can feel it scratching away at it. So when you're using a nib, it's probably best to use some heavier Bristol or cardstock or something like that. But you can see how nicely it does this sketchiness. I really like it for that. Okay, so there's the 4 different pens drawing the same exact thing, and you can easily compare the difference between those two. My favorite pens. Okay, I'm going to give you my recommendation on the absolute favorite pens that I use. I use tons of different pens, but for now, at this point in my career and in my personal timeline, these are the pens that I love to use. And of course, there's links below on where you can buy these pens and have them shipped directly to you. Okay, so my favorite pen right now is currently the Copic Gas and Fude brush pen. The thing I love about this is the ink is waterproof. It's got a great nylon brush tip that just makes some pretty crisp lines for a brush pen, and I just like the ink flow in this thing. It's really quite good. Maybe the only drawback is it might run out a little too soon. I want these pens to last a little bit longer than they actually do. Second favorite brush pen right now is the Zebra Fude brush pen. What's cool about this, number one, is it's another nylon tipped brush, but I love this tip. For whatever reason, this gives me my favorite kind of line of all time. The other cool thing about it is it's got a felt tip on the back, a small felt tip. So this is great for any sort of detailed work that you want to do, and not have to, just have the more control than you would have with the brush tip. So this is great. Thing about this pen though, one drawback is the ink is not waterproof, and so if anything gets wet on it, it smudges really easy. Whereas with the Copic Gas and Fude, it is waterproof. You can watercolor over the top of it. You can use Copics over the top of it, and the ink never smudges or bleeds or anything. So that's great. All right, technical pens. This right here is the Micron. It's a classic, go-to for many artists. I used this for several years. It's got the plastic tip that's very firm, and you can get some dynamic lines from it, a little bit of thick and thin with these lines, but this is a pretty solid pen, a good choice. Very disposable. I burn through these pens so much, and so that's why I actually started using these Copics now. This ink in the Copic lasts so much longer than they do in here, and also the ink is waterproof. The cool thing about the Copics is the tips are removable, so you can replace the tips as soon as they wear out. And if the ink runs out, you can replace the ink as well and buy new ink cartridges and put new ink cartridges in there whenever you run dry. It's got a nice metal container or casing, I guess, for everything. It's a good solid pen, and I love these. So you can, this is the more affordable, this is the more expensive. Can't go wrong with either of those. All right, as far as ballpoint pens, High-Tech C. They range from 05 to I think 005 or 025 is the smallest. You can get a really nice small tip on the small end. This is the largest tip. It's the one that I showed in the example, and this is just a good solid sketching, drawing, writing pen. I love using it for journal writing, for calendaring, for taking notes, and also for drawing. And then lastly, as far as nibs go, I haven't experimented too much with nibs, but I really like what's going on here. This is the Nico G-tip, designed specifically for manga drawing, and you can use it for any sort of line drawing, but I like the sharpness. I like the thick and thin that you can get with this, and then the actual pen holder that I have here, I don't know what these are called, is the Tachikawa T25, and it's quite nice. Fits in the hand perfectly, and it's a little bit lightweight, but it's a good pen holder. So those are my recommended pens. These are the pens that I'm using right now for the things that I like to draw. This might change, this evolves. I always find new pens. I always get bored of old pens, but for here now, this is what I like, and this is what I recommend for this year doing Inktober. So if you're not sure what pen you want to use for Inktober, check out these pens, try them out and see if they work for you and see what you like. That's it for today's video. Thank you everybody, and I will see you next week. Bye. Hey, just want to let you know that Inktober shirts are available for the first time only at cottonbureau.com, and if you're planning on wearing a shirt during Inktober, maybe it could be an Inktober shirt.